and welcome to this very exciting session. I thought I'd kick things off by talking about what we're actually trying to accomplish here. At Davos Worldwide, one of the big things that we strive to always do is focus on collaboration. And we kicked that off this year at the Davos conference in January with a focus on peace at that initiative, where we brought together some of the leading orgs to talk about what's working, what's not working, and how they and we can all work together. And we've continued that theme of collaboration, well, kind of always, but definitely through our conferences throughout this year. And now, as we sit here at COP30, our focus is really on what can the leading orgs that have a focus on sustainability and the other SDGs of the UN and the COP30 initiative, what can they do together? What is working in this direction? What isn't working? How can we help each other? How can we progress along these global goals? And we have an amazing panel today. And actually, I don't know how much time everybody's going to get to speak because there is a lot to cover. And these are all people who are deeply entrenched in this space and can speak for a very long time individually. But let's kick things off. Tatiana, do you want to lead us into things here? Oh, you're muted.
Oh, yes. Hi, Chris. Hi, everyone. So good to see you and to meet you. So happy to be part of this conversation. And Chris, if I understand your question correctly, it's about what challenges and opportunities we see in terms of really moving forward on these global collaborations that are necessary, like that, what is happening right now in COP30, right? I think
Exactly.
maybe just briefly about Leaders in Purpose. I'm the co-founder and chief strategy officer of Leaders in Purpose. We're a global leadership and economic transformation platform that really works and mobilizes with leaders that what we call are shaping the next economy, that economic system that is right upon us, no matter from which perspective you look at where you are right now, standing on the global scale of viewpoints, be it AI, be it society, being it nature, being it all the aspects, the challenges that are bringing us together. We know something new is upon us. And those businesses and leaders that understand that and will create that value within that realm are the ones that will lead us into a very thriving economy. And so from that standpoint, what we really see is that the opportunity right now is to really come together from a business perspective, but also from a perspective of regulatory and capacity building, right? So I think it's a time where we have to rewrite policy to enable actually businesses to thrive in a more connected world. What does this even mean, more connected, right? Bring it connected through, if we look right now, what is happening at COP, that we have nature services that we understand are actually foundational pillars of our economies and of our regions and our societies, which we also all are sharing, being it water, oceans, and nature, through the forests or other aspects, how we're sharing even the health molecules that come out of it, to data sharing, AI, sovereignty, I just came out of the session on the space economy that is upon us that only can really grow and thrive if we build these underlying foundations from an incentive perspective, a regulatory perspective, and within that, incentive for businesses to build win-win business models that are beyond win-lose business models. So really rewriting a little bit more of what we understand is of value in an economy, and then how we allocate and associate that value. And if I may, just from this high-level perspective, bring in the perspective that we represent.
No, I think that is a great introduction, and there are at least 3 or 4 points in there that I'm going to want to come back to if we have time for the entire panel. But let's continue with the quick once around at the beginning. Miriam, would you like to go next?
Sure thing. Thanks, Chris. Miriam Roble, I lead ESG and sustainability at FTI Consulting. So what we do, we're about an 8,000 person consulting firm that has a global presence, and we work with large corporates and investors on their ESG programs, integrating ESG into transactions, strategy, and the like. And what I'm really seeing in the market at a macro level is this reset of better aligning sustainability and the underlying themes to business and to the business case of why sustainability strengthens a company's value proposition, why it makes an investment stronger, and the like. And so I think what we're seeing at COP30 is a little disconnect between government and business. I think we're seeing the huge amount of polarization even across borders and across different stakeholder groups. And so a lot of my job is really to find the true north for companies and investors and help them figure out what topics are truly material to them, how to work within different political and investment landscapes, and how to true it up. I think there's no one size fits all, and maybe in the last era of sustainability, there was a sense that there was a safe path that would keep all stakeholders happy. But now we're seeing much more individual tailoring of strategies to markets and stakeholders and individual businesses. So that's the perspective I bring.
Yeah, that's excellent. Isabella, would you like to go next? Oh, you also are muted.
Thank you, Chris. As Tatiana already shared, Miriam, this complements quite a bit. Obviously, we're looking from strategic lens and we're looking from global leadership. We're seeing obviously the huge, tremendous gap, and more than ever, the lowest trust that possible could be between private and public sector. And it's really important to restore that as well, to govern in ways that also include NGOs as well, small businesses that can really nimbly and effectively address some of these issues that we're seeing while following these ESGs norms, and also be able to properly analyze and see what's really working and what's working in which environment and why, and what can be actually replicated and what can be done to be sustainable. Because a lot of times we think about sustainability that costs a lot of money, but sometimes it's actually just a change in the habit, change how we perceive certain things. And then also be able to govern. How do we govern this, right? It's like what normatives we were pulling through, like looking what's going on in Europe in one market versus what's going on US, what's going on maybe Middle East or Asia, and how do we bring this together, and how do we distribute this that is also ethical, transformative, but also impactful, and also obviously creates the results that we all seek.
Beautiful. I think we're all singing from the same hymnal here. Camille, are you online? Would you like to go next?
Yes, of course. So we as Davos Club, we are the club of the global thinkers, of the innovators, of the investors, politics, journalists. And we, what we do, we amplify the actions of our members, and we support bridging the between the capital and to the innovations. And what I think what is the problem now is that we got as the world, we got enough resources, we got enough the wisdom, enough everything, but the problem is that to connect, as earlier speaker told, and to connect the government with the youth government with the corporations, and to make that be something that we must rebuild the trust, because many actions from many years in climate makes that people, and also I think about some things are not good for the climate, but to control people, to tax people, to do other things. And people many years ago, they was, yeah, we want to make a world a better place and to make the climate and empowerment people and everything good. But now they see that many organizations, many projects has make a world a better place, but the reason they doing, they want to have a more control, more power. So people backed up for this. And rebuilding the trust is, I think, the main thing we can do. And also to the organization stop compare each other, but start really cooperate. Because I think this is for example, no one single office or no government or no one person or organization can change, make really impact. We must start working together with government, with the family office. And also I think that the ultra wealthy family office and ultra wealthy individuals should be like big power, big responsibility, and should lead the smaller family offices to the great purpose. But as people think and again rebuild the trust that many actions are only to make more control or make something different. Because, for example, the US and China produce the more pollute the air more than Europe. But in Europe, I'm from Europe, is the situation like that the regulations, etc., make situation that automotive industry is going down completely, and there is a paradox situation that automotive companies from Europe start making joint venture with the China companies or buy carbon credits from Tesla to stay alive in the industry and give people jobs. And this is that those regulations are not good for the, I think, the whole region, and for sure not for people. And it's I think it's stupidity. So those things destroy the trust of people who earlier was for this case, and now they look at this like, I don't know, because maybe it's another trick to make control of us. And I think the rebuild the trust is the one of the main factors we should do.
Yeah, trust really, that's a that's a deep question, particularly when you're talking not just between corporations and governments, but cross border and really cross many borders, cross culturally, where different ideas exist. But it is something that keeps coming up here, and I think that's definitely going to be part of whatever solution we can get to. Lawrence, would you like to chime in here?
Yeah, good afternoon. Lawrence Klinsky. I'm the Executive Director of the Family Offices for Sustainable Development Program at Public Foundation. We work very closely with United Nations, governments all across the world. And my job is basically to educate family offices, private sector on the proper ways to engage on true public-private partnerships on a multilateral stage. And that really begins, as everybody just talked about, this was about trust. I'm gonna pick up on that thread, which basically it requires a significant level of transparency on how these programs are actually being built, and from a private sector standpoint, monetized, whether that's a return on investment, a return on equity, return on social community. The definitions are changing, as we develop over time and have new instruments like AI and machine learning and technologies that are advancing the connectivity in this world. So this is actually one of the most intriguing times, globally, for the public sector and the private sector to engage. More opportunities. You're seeing, obviously, geopolitical, ongoings that are changing the landscape, and ultimately the roles of the private sector being able to engage, leading with sustainable development while preserving legacy, but also understanding how the resiliency and the regenerative economics can work. That is the key. Ultimately, everything that we're building and everything we're engaging on a multilateral stage requires that level of regenerative economics and returns. So it's a super exciting and a very, very, very pertinent panel to have.
Excellent, excellent. And I think there's one other person in the panel, or is that everybody? Did I miss anybody? If I missed anybody, raise your hand. All right, excellent. Then let me sort of summarize, or not even summarize, but like frame what I think I heard most from everybody, which is absolutely there was a huge amount that this is about trust, and there was a huge amount about the trust between governments and enterprise has broken down in many places around the world. And there was a lot of discussion about how do we handle both effective leadership, but also cross society, cross border. How do we work around the world? Because this is kind of everybody's problem. And how do we do that in a way that isn't just a power play, just a way to sort of subjugate the local population, and actually is good for the planet, good for all of us, and works collaboratively. And there are a ton of different individual topics that we could be discussing in terms of sustainability. But I kind of want to frame this, and then we'll go around and do a roundtable again based on a panel I was on yesterday where we were talking about critical minerals. And I started off by sort of hypothesizing that there's this view that mining is a dirty thing, and one of the things we have to be concerned with is, if we want to bring critical mineral processing and mining back into the countries that have given it up over the last 70 years, we have to think about that and think about how that affects profitability and sustainability and everything. And the CEO, very successful mining CEO from Australia, said, I mean, there's truth to that, of course, but that's really a 70 or even 100-year ago problem. And today, mining is super clean. We have all sorts of new technology, but also we have a new mindset that, when you go in and you open up a mine, you're looking at being in that community for 30 or 50 years, and you can't be like polluting their water supply and destroying them. Like that just doesn't work as a business, and it's kind of all baked in. And I think from his perspective, that's probably true. And then somebody else said, yeah, and look what's happened in China, where they, in fact, were 50 years ago doing this top level strip mining, contaminating the water supply, destroying everything. They've cleaned that up. They're state of the art facilities now. But when they cleaned that up, what ended up happening was the actual mining operations moved to Myanmar, where they're doing the exact same thing in Myanmar that they were doing in China 30 years ago and in Australia and the US 100 years ago. And so it's kind of like a whack-a-mole problem, if you will, where there's always somebody reverting to the less sustainable, less good outcome because of the regulatory environment in which they operate, because of globally how the supply chains work and how we engage in profitability and investment. So from that perspective, how do we get not just get the trust back, but get the coordination, the cooperation of organizations and governments and NGOs around the world? Like what are the first one or two or handful of things that we need to do actionable to take us to the next level? We'll kind of just go around in order again. Tatiana, would you like to go first?
Thank you so much. And thank you for everyone else what you have shared and incredible work that you're doing. I think it's so clearly that we have such a depth of multi-stakeholder conveners here that are really working on this intersection that is very, very fascinating, right? To hear and listen to all the agents in this realm. I would say, Chris, from our perspective, being a multi-stakeholder convener in this platform. So we started out as part of the private sector engagement strategy with the World Bank, where we brought together the private sector exactly around these systems transition conversations in context of how do we eliminate poverty, how do we allow for public-private partnerships to foster in very real pragmatic ways. And so this is really our origin. So this is at the core that we look at this problem that you're mentioning right now. And I have a couple answers to that. One that is, of course, a little bit more idealistic, but I would say this is absolutely where we're going, is that as we are evolving our economic paradigm, we also have to evolve. What does it even mean to have a license to operate in that? What is coming next? Maybe right now we have a little bit of confusion and disruption there. Maybe it also belongs more to the terminologies that we're using than actually to the sensibility of the systemic data that we have. If today we understand that countries in a border between countries or within a region is making this problem not my problem, we actually know now that this will come around in a later stage and maybe even faster than we used to. And so now we can show this with transparency, technology, and the right data. And then, of course, we come into the sphere of trusted data and clean data sources, to really track scope 1, scope 2, scope 3 effects that are also societal effects that actually will not allow in a very near future for these kind of, let's say, last realms of opportunity that are being leveraged within an old paradigm, right? So, but this, of course, it's built on the hypothesis that we are right now moving into a different paradigm of an economic system. This is really something that we very strongly believe in, although it might look right now very disproportionate like that. But when we allocate capital and leadership intention and incentives into a direction of economic systems and valuations that actually take those systems effects that maybe we don't need to call anymore sustainability, but are effects for our supply chain, for societal unrest that can go towards resilience, community resilience, country level resilience, right? National security resilience. So there are many ways how this can ladder up and down, where you can actually very fast see in your fact sheet how these kind of decisions will midterm lead very likely to detrimental effects for your company output and for your economic output and GDP output, and also for actors, I will believe, like China or other large actors that really have, maybe right now procured more of these practices. On the other hand, if we also look on the longer realm, looking also at the perspective of mining that you have just mentioned, the innovation that is happening right now, and this is maybe the even more exciting lens here, the innovations through entrepreneurship and businesses that are going deep and down into these problems and these challenges and are finding viable business models that are societal relevant and that create momentum. I think this is where we will see a lot of next generation intention, and also, like, something that also I know Lawrence and public is very keen about, where's the next generation going of wealth holders, because we have right now this massive wealth shift. And so these kind of issues are becoming more and more transparent and can be solved through opportunities and through the entrepreneurial lens.
Yeah, that's a very good take. And in fact, I'm probably about halfway through your speech, I was tempted to say, all right, I definitely want to go to Lawrence next because I know it's going to fit directly into this. However, I think I'm going to approach it the other way. Lawrence, I'm going to come to you last again and let you put the whole wrapper around this as we come back. So Miriam, if I can come back to you, what's your input on this?
Sure thing. I definitely agree with Tatiana, and I think that we're underestimating, or not this panel, but the broader public and business community is underestimating the power of the global supply chain to actually make change, and is overestimating the capacity of governments to do that. And I think that you generally have the same buyer for the critical minerals, whether they're mined in one country or another. You have similar investors in different mining operations, and that's just mining, right? If we zoom out, this is an increasingly connected world, and supply chains are increasingly global, and it's really powerful what business can do to make demands on their supply chain. I call it the shadow regulator right now. We have so much work at FTI based on the calls we get from companies that say, I am a supplier to fill in the blank company. There's a handful that are the usual names we hear. And they've said that we need to do X, Y, and Z in order to keep selling to them. That is so much more powerful than we think a regulation is coming down and it may or may not happen, and it may or may not get litigated or overturned. There's tremendous opportunity for the business community to engage, and also for ultimate stakeholders, whether it's investors or employees or end-use customers, to demand more transparency, more data, and really kick the tires on that data. So an empty promise of we are good neighbors or we are acting sustainably is no longer sufficient. And I think that the questions are getting harder and harder to answer. And that's when you can really force change, is when that change is tied to investment dollars flowing, or it's tied to a company being able to make a big sale. That's really powerful in the business world. And that's where I see a lot of this going.
Yeah, I think you're spot on in many ways, Miriam. I totally agree. We've seen this happen time and time again, and not just internally to supply chain, but ultimately as a product of consumer pressure, right? I mean, we saw Philip Morris and the data they needed to require and the procedures they need to put in place to deal with micro tobacco farmers around the world. Same thing with Nestle and cocoa farmers. And so we know this can work. But that said, Camille, coming back to you, and not to pigeonhole you as the European guy, but what the heck is going on in Europe? Because, like as you just said, that whole story that Miriam just described seems to not quite be working there. So what's your perspective on that?
Yeah, so I'm a normally optimistic person, but I will be realist. So the situation I must also put again because in Europe they told shut down the mining, etc. For example, in Poland, they shut down mining carbon, and now the situation is like that. The Ukraine companies want to buy those minings to again start mining. And so this is a paradox that they, because they are not European Union, so they can do it in our country, but our people can't do it because we are European Union. So this is the situation. And when we compare it to globally, we have two competitors, USA and China, and they don't stop mining because they know that the produce of the energy, renewable energy, is sometimes too high because we can put wind turbine everywhere, but seriously, in some places there are no wind. So you know what I'm saying, that we can put solars everywhere, but sometimes and many times that this carbon is much efficient, costly to produce the energy. And when we also I want to notice that fact that we are when we want to change, we must change the shift of the ideology of the owners, of the shareholders of the biggest companies. And this is not easy because companies must give a profit. And for example, the situation which I also told yesterday on panel, when there was a history of the light bulb, that the first light bulbs give lights for the 10,000 hours, but the companies, Osram, Philips, etc., say, okay, engineers, now don't improve the light bulb, don't make another great innovation or something, but make that this light bulb will only light for 1,000 hours. And this is one of the example, but I see when I go to the innovations, sometimes the innovation is too good to be go to public because nobody will buy it because they will sell only one thing, not in another few months, another few months, another few months. So this kind of behave, it's not going to make a change because we can speak, have a conferences, make a movement, people go on the street and young people, etc. But when those kind of things are not changed, like for example the Tesla, real Tesla, of course, innovations, when he want to give electricity for free, and he make those kind of experiments to remind that he free electric car which goes 150 kilometers or something, he created in 1905 or something like that. But those innovations was buried. When he died, the people go to his office, take those patents, and boo, you are like this. And I was on the one conference in Europe on automotive, and they asked the question. There was lots of CEOs of the biggest companies, and they was the question for the public. And start the engineer asked the question: why we go to the electric car when we already know that are some bigger, better, like hydrogen car or something like that? But why we go to the electric car? And it was like in 2010 or 2015. I don't remember the exact date. And the moderator was like, "Wow, now you kill the everyone here," and was a silent for like 2-3 minutes. And then one of CEO say, I will take on the chest this question. And he told, it was a closed conference, and he told that they have aim to make electric car to 2055. Then something. So this kind of behave don't make any change for the world, because when the profit, and we must, as I say, I'm optimistic, but we must be realistic in this case. When the profit is the main factor, and it is the main factor nowadays, when you have shareholders, the companies like ChatGPT, OpenAI don't go to the market, but it's like 500 billions. So a bubble, yeah, but it's going like that, and the competition between China and the US, it's making that the other regions like the Europe or other countries will be so lost in future, and they can go back to compete, and they can give taxes to citizens and destroy them totally. But what will be the kind of future when when those big and other players make a decision without any checking what is going on? So I think this is the issue of this.
Yeah, that's definitely a it's a good and interesting and insightful take. There are a lot of questions. You probably need to be in Brussels having these conversations with the EU proper, because I think they're not currently making the right choices in many directions, even though they are definitely sort of doing it with a clarity of vision. Um, yeah, there's a danger for Europe for sure. All right, Isabella, what is your take here?
As a founder and CEO of Legacy Leader Institute, and understanding how we really approach not only leadership but legacy to the matter that it's differently handled than, as Lauren's point, to Middle East versus other countries in the world, I find that the trifecta that we instituted, it's actually working very well. It's not just because of small businesses, but looking things to a three-pronged approach from international affairs perspective, public relations, and diplomacy. And when I talk about diplomacy, I'm not talking about government-led diplomacy. I'm talking about commercial diplomacy. So when we have these conversations and opportunity to really understand geopolitically, I'm originally from Europe myself, and always feel like I'm 1 foot in multiple different continents at any given time, but really understanding how is everything interconnected beyond supply chain. I also find the complexities can only be solved if we still do, even though it's still lagging and needs a lot of innovative solution with the public sector, but we also need to really look at what private sector role plays there as well. And then how these relationships are being intertwined, in addition to social sectors, that I feel like those dynamics are going to be really huge game changers in times to come. So also looking things from intelligence perspective, having opportunity to deal with senior intelligence officers and dealing with liaisons and advisors, not only for UN and NATO and NGOs across the world, when it comes back again, why we're having plethora of issues that we're having, because it's competition. It's not even just about collaboration and having a profit. It's also about how do we eliminate potential competitors? What games do we play? How we also play on the larger scale? And then what do we really do? What depth we're providing based on experiences that we're having, and also obviously guidance that we're giving, what we're doing internally, what we're doing externally, how we're showing up politically, economically, as well as obviously through engagements as a leaders. And I really feel like when we really start looking deeper in that, and we really want to have that transformative opportunity, and I'm seeing successes in micro scale, and I'm sure in months to come on the larger scale as well, because there is the appetite. We have to have a different frameworks. We also have to have a very different infrastructure. We also have to have a very different dialogues. It's not anymore us and them and allegiances and all these different aspects that we're seeing. And I think what we really need to look at is that, yes, we have strategic impact that we want to make, and that's what we're trying to do here, not just from our efforts, but through our very selected partners that we're doing this. And how do we really not only navigate complexity, but also dissolve these models in order to really show what's possible. And as a result, as I said, understanding the systems. It's different when you play in a capitalistic system versus socialistic versus democratic, right? But it's also important to understand where each other have the pain points, and knowing those pain points. It's amazing when we start talking from the pain and what solutions can be there. So back to mining regulations and everything else, as I point out, governance that really are across the board the same. So it's not exclusion for one group versus the other. And when we govern with shared understanding and with aligned goals and objectives, again, this is not a pie in the sky. Magic happens. And I think that a lot of leaders are right now really much so ready for that.
All right, Lawrence, that was a lot. Do you want to put a bow around all of that?
Yeah, no, look, everybody's got incredibly valid points, right? And then again, there's a whole language that exists between the public and the private sector. And when we get that aligned, you can actually see movement of projects, movement of capital, movement of technology transfer. And again, the key is how we're basically setting up the global highways, the engagement pathways, right? Using the multilateral frameworks. Again, UN is a phenomenal organization when you actually understand what exactly its intention is meant to be, right? Again, it has to be properly balanced between that public and that private sector. So, take a couple examples like the ABAS, the Antigua and Barbuda Accords for SIDS. It's basically a social and economic framework for 38 countries of the small island developing states. This is an actual framework that is intended to guide. What you have to do is you have to build those pieces that enable the engagement for that ABIS. You allow those frameworks to basically guide the conversations. You're building the instruments like the SID Center of Excellence, which is being created, which has specific the Innovation and Technology Mechanism. It has the Debt Service Support Initiative, the SIDS Global Data Hub. These are actual entities and projects that are enabling the private sector to properly engage with the public. When you're coming through this, right, and the biggest challenge I think everybody can agree is private sector coming into a government and just saying, "Oh, I can absolutely change your world, mining, energy, all these things. It is going to change your economy. It's going to be brilliant." Every government in the world is going to say, "Great, I want it," right? But that's just not the reality we live in. There's costs, how this is being set up in proof of concepts, how the multilateral development bank world, how the DFIs are playing into this. It has to be programmatic. Everything really requires if there's energy and there's mining and there's logistics, we're creating these programs that enable that conversation to happen very programmatic. Then you can create, the technology transfer mechanisms where the private sector knows exactly what they are going to generate in terms of their returns, how this gets set up in terms of the private sector. The private sector must have financial returns, especially when we're driving the philanthropical conversation. Their DAFs, their PRIs, technology transfer mechanisms. So all of these pieces, if you can set up the framework, an energy framework, and the education frameworks, again, it enables that conversation to happen much more freely and allows the conversation to be regulated so the private sector knows what it needs, the public sector knows what it needs. And that, like at public and with FOSD, and when I'm out there talking with all the families, the conversations all circle around three things: preservation of legacy, preservation of capital, right? And a true understanding of how this is being advanced and how those work together and the economic returns. So if you can create the programs, you can create the pathways, it's not hard to be able to engage in those conversations, right? Where it breaks down is when we get into, oh, I need to own the data. I need to own the derivative works. I need to own these. These are all those points that basically will cause the fail points in every conversation that we have. Then when you're also going government, private sector, direct to government, you're basically beholden to turnover. You're beholden to all the conversations. But if you actually have those frameworks and you know exactly what you can operate under, that's when we can actually see true movement. And we're working with partners like the World Food Program, UNUSA, basically advancing the space conversation. Loved that space conversation, right? Because helping to basically advance that. It's AI, it's space, it's future tech. All of these allow the leapfrog of these developing nations in particular to have more access to the global economies. We're basically building AI logic centers with family offices coming in, leading, helping to build capacity and teach and have AI centers in these developing countries. The private sector then can engage with their technologies to an official tech transfer mechanism, kind of like the way that the United Nations Tech Bank is designed to do, but allowing the private sector to have very specific ways to engage, right? Within the parameters that they know where and to be able to help them understand the economic returns, the social returns, you can balance that. And speed, my last point on this, speed matters. Right now, speed absolutely matters, and that is something that requires that new language between public and private sector to be advanced. So I'll stop there and hope that wraps it in a bow.
No, that is great. And so I think on that note, and on the note of speed really mattering, and coming back to where I sort of started the introduction about our role here as trying to drive collaboration and a focus on collaboration, let's do once more around the horn with everybody and kind of give the one or two actual sort of immediate actions that you would like to see either from your fellow panelists, how you can work with them, how they can work with you, what would be useful, or for our viewers in the audience who may not be directly involved in the panel, but would like to get involved and would like to help collaborate and drive some of these solutions. So what do we actually do? How do we make this real, Tatiana?
Thank you so much, Chris. And this is an excellent question, and it's so absolutely necessary because exactly to your point, things are changing so fast on so many levels. If you don't get involved, you almost get behind. And there are so many opportunities to get involved. Within the realm of leaders and purpose, what we are doing on the one hand is that if you are a global private sector leader or innovator of an organization where you truly believe that you're operating already on business paradigms that are, let's say, more regenerative and a more future fit in the economies that are coming our way, leveraging, of course, technology and AI, and to join our global leadership circle. This is really where our network virtually convenes and builds initiatives together, launches initiatives together, and learns and shares also best practices. Because I think something that I really enjoyed that Lawrence said and Miriam said as well is the power of programmatic frameworks to enable and empower collaboration. And it's very needed because we're moving towards an ecosystemic economy, ecosystemic living, understanding us as society beyond borders, but within ecosystems, bioregions, and in the functioning of that in a very pragmatic way. And so what happens through these convenings of ecosystem and of networks of partners is actually the ability to tune into that which matters to you most and to see how you can contribute either with your vision, your purpose, your capacity, your capital into that, and to be part of a broader movement. I would also say that now is probably the only time in human history where we as humanity have still the ability to write the incentive systems that are upon us. AI agents, Gen AI, and then super AI and super intelligence will join us for better or for worse, hopefully for better in that. So our incentive systems and the value of it will absolutely transcend way beyond what human needs are. It will go towards systems needs, AI needs, right? So it's a very exciting time to really partake and be part of something.
Excellent. So Miriam, what is your take aside from joining Tatiana's leader circle and writing new incentives for AIs? No, kidding, don't do that. What do you say? What do we need to do? What's the action here? How can people help you? How can you help people? Where do we go?
Sure. I think in addition to convening and joining coalitions and finding like-minded organizations, committing capital is the most powerful thing that folks in my world can do right now. Making a commitment of capital to a certain strategy and making that publicly known, or joining with others and committing capital together, which is generally a proven way of doing things in capital markets, is a really powerful way of influencing change. As companies that I advise look to figure out where they want to be and where they're going, they need to have a plan that they can take to an investment committee, or they can share with a CFO that will support it. So having real concrete evidence that there is money out there that wants to invest in, whether it's new types of packaging or waste removal technology or renewable energy offtake, that is the most important thing that they can use then to move their businesses forward. And so, it's easier said than done, but the proof points that a lot of companies are looking for is there capital here to meet the moment if I show up with a product or service.
Yeah, I mean that's probably actually a whole different discussion. And actually, Lawrence had talked about technology transfer and really, you know, it's one thing to talk about the existing multinationals and the large corporations and how they operate. It's another thing to talk about small businesses, even micro businesses, farmers, and whatever around the world. But then there's the whole question of actual innovation and products that aren't proven in the market yet and maybe have a good impact. And maybe, yeah, it is, as everything, a complicated, moving space. Okay, Camille, what say you? What should people do to help you out? How can you help others out?
About at first about the AI, I will say a little joke that AI can now do almost everything, but except convince government to start working together. For this, we need still miracles. so, so this is about, but for now, for example, for people who are in Belém, we engaged to go to the refugee climate pavilion, which we are the community official partner. And the Tafadzwa, who will be panelist tomorrow, we make the introduction to Anand, and this whole situation it take like 10 minutes. So few messages and it's happened. So many things can be done very quickly. Okay, I see. Okay. Because I see Chris and I see now you and don't see Chris, and it was different for me because I don't see his face.
Hopefully, I'm back.
Yeah, because I was you talking by eyes. So also another thing which someone can cooperate is that in Davos we will be official partner also of a few events, but about the Brazil there will be the Casa Brazil. And also Casa Africa, House Africa, created by our member Bernard, and he is looking for partners. There will be lots of government officials there. So if any company wants to sponsor this or something like that, be partner, be part of this. Let's talk. Let's make it happen. Quick intro, and you discuss it how we'd like. For another things. We are looking for people who have amazing innovations which can make a really difference, and we will try because we can't guarantee, but we will try to make it happen to the world, because many things which which good locally can be replied by in many places, of course, by checking it. And this is the true. And for example, one project from Australia, they start making those because everyone wants a wind turbine, but it's when this is start go to recycling, it's a big issue what to do with this wind turbine. Yes, but they create the technology to recycle it, and they are already start talking discussion with 2 countries, 2 governments. So if someone also interested like this, just let me know. And with other projects, we have lots of very interesting people who making really changes. We support them, other members support them. So we as Davos Club are always happy to cooperate with everyone to make a better world for all humans, all nature, and all animals, because we must remember that what we do now is for our generation, for our kids, but for all should be great.
Excellent. And Isabella, what would you like to see from your fellow panelists and or from the audience? How can you help them?
Fantastic question. Actually, I love that you asked that, and it's so great to hear what Tatiana shared, as well Miriam, as well Camille. So I think you're just around the panel itself. I feel like it's amazing synergy already. And obviously being behavioralist and having behavioralist on my team, that we're really looking at how do we navigate change with AI era, but also as well behavioral and governance imperative that is really necessary, important. That is obviously something that we do extremely effectively well. I love what was being already mentioned, and I just want to echo that we're already building so much of capacity building, and specifically extreme leadership or leadership development on the level that can really handle this level of the changes and transformations at rapid scale. But also really, as I mentioned before, we can offer commercial diplomacy that we're finding extremely effective and institutional collaboration. And I love what Camille is echoing over and over, because we have such a discourse in government relationships and communication as well, commitments, right? Because a lot of promises have been made, but what's ultimately being executed upon. And it's just a great opportunity to really strengthen that, regardless if we're dealing with combination of or individually or specifically around government entity, public, again, sector, or we're dealing with private or NGOs. In terms of where we can also help is obviously those tailored solutions, because we're finding the global network is phenomenal, obviously playground, but it's important to really have that shared vision and be able to execute. And I can't stress how much I feel sense of urgency. So I love that it's been also addressed, how important it is to act effectively very quickly. So one of the areas where we seek that we can not only help, but also would love to collaborate and have an opportunity to support one another is to come up with a solution that we're going to see and what's going to happen between 2026 and 2030, and really show what's possible. And we have some specific work that we're undergoing right now. We'd love to share more, and who is interested to really make a rapid, radical, effective changes and really embrace transformation, as well as elevate the leadership and legacy to that point. We're here.
Yeah, I think that's definitely something we're hearing over and over on this panel, and really leadership is going to be key. And there are a lot of people here who are themselves leaders and have access to lots of other leaders. And really, I think we as a group can really, help organize and drive some change. So, Lawrence, last but certainly not least, why don't you bring us home? What can people do for you? How can we help? What do you need?
Look, on that front, it's everybody here is already showing up, right? We're the easiest company on the planet to work with. Just grab a shovel and we figure out how to build programs together. It's ultimately it's as simple as that. But from an action standpoint, right, what we need to do is we have to stop thinking about impact separately from the growth of business, separate from the growth of technologies and transfers. Again, it's funny, people are asking me, it's like, oh, what do you think about impact investing? I think it's great, but I also love working with those funds and firms and people who don't do impact investing, because they're doing proof of concepts and technology transfer, which is having maximum impact. So the definition and how we're redefining the nomenclature and the impact equation and the return equation, that's super important, particularly on the corporate side. Because again, too many times it's, oh, talk to this, talk that. The world has become extraordinarily small. Using these frameworks, the ability to scale, do these proof of concepts, get one of these things out there, and then it's easy to scale across using the DFIs, MDBs, and other capitals, especially as you're going with the programs. So, for me, it requires that level of creativity, right, and programmatic approach. Again, those that are in food security, it's like, look, the World Food Program, those that are in space, UNUSA. I mean, these are all groups out there that have capacity and access and the ability to basically bring a holistic approach on the impact side and on the sustainable development side as we're looking towards 2030. But we also want to be looking beyond. 2030 is 4 years away. The next step beyond this, again, we're going to get as far as we can to 2030, and it doesn't stop there, right? So understanding and redefining that return equation, redefining the impact equation, and then just showing up and grabbing a shovel. And if there are programs that make sense, hey, love what I've heard from everybody on this panel, and however we can be helpful to advance sustainable development conversation, we will.
Yeah, I think that's a point that most of you made this last time around, which I think is critical, which is we're kind of all already here doing something. And part of what this panel is learning what else is out there, because there's a lot. This is a big, complicated question in a big, complicated space. And we're all willing to get hands dirty. So, Camille spoke about, getting things done with a couple of phone calls. And I get the sense that we all kind of want to do that. So if you're out there, if you're in the audience and you want to get your hands dirty and help sort of tackle these problems, or if you need assistance, I think I could say that we're all here to help. So thanks, everybody. This has been wonderful. Hopefully you enjoyed it. Hopefully you enjoy the rest of the conference. And I look forward to speaking to all of you at Davos again in January, if not sooner.
Thank you, Chris.
Take care,
Wonderful,
everyone.
wonderful
Thank
moderator.
you.
Thank you.